What is one thing that you can do in your garden that will suppress weeds, help the soil retain moisture, and build the soil at the same time? The answer to that is mulching. So today we're going to talk a little bit about different types of mulches to use in your garden, and then we'll also answer some questions. We're speaking from our experience of about 10 years of gardening here. The first question is, when should I mulch, and then what should I mulch with? That's the question every gardener has. We recommend to mulch right at the time of planting. If you're putting seedlings in the ground, mulch right away if you can. If you're planting seeds, you might want to wait until the seedlings are up a good little bit. I have also prepared a bed, covered it with mulch, and then just pulled back little spots where I wanted to plant seeds, and that worked pretty good too. I do that also for seedlings. I'll just cover the bed with mulch and then use a garden knife to pop the seedling in. So we'll get into the different kinds of mulches that you can use in your garden, and then also what we prefer next.
Mm-hmm. The type of mulch that we probably use the most over the years is grass clippings. Our first garden that we had together, that's what we used 90% of the time. We mulched with wood chips, I guess, in some places. So there's a couple of pros to that one. It's free after you have paid for your lawnmower with a bagger. I just have a push mower, so I get a lot of exercise when I'm getting my grass clippings. It acts as a fertilizer because it is high in nitrogen, so that's helpful. And grass clippings also retain moisture really well. So, if you're in a hot, dry area and you have to irrigate, you'll probably have to do less if you have grass clippings. The downside to grass clippings is that they will break down by the end of summer. We try to put them on pretty heavy in the beginning, and for most plants, that's enough because the plants will get big, shade out the ground beneath them, and then that helps to suppress the weeds. There's a few plants that don't get quite as big, so I'm thinking of like Campanula and Lysianthus. Those beds I will just go through and manually weed frequently, and it's usually not a big deal. Another downside is that you will have to do a lot of work to get your mulch. It takes a lot of grass to cover the ground well enough to be a weed barrier.
Next we have leaf mulch, and this is something that I get from the city leaf dump here locally. It's free. So that's one of the pluses of that. I don't know if it's free everywhere or if every city has a leaf dump, but I would say check, find out if you can. The pluses are that it is free, it does really well at moisture retention, and it does really good at suppressing weeds. Some of the downsides of leaf mulch are that it does tend to contain a lot of debris because people just blow up their leaves in the fall and bag everything, and so I get a lot of little plastic toys, just random things. Then also, it's a haven for bugs like slugs, earwigs, that kind of thing. So I don't really like it for that. We did get a question about how to keep, so say that you're going to mow up your own leaves. If you're going to mulch a bed with it, I would recommend to mow them up and chop them up a little bit. But then we also had the issue that would sometimes blow away over winter. We would, cover our beds in the fall. One thing we found is that if you mow your leaves up with grass, the grass helps to kind of mat it down. If you have a bin of leaves you want to put on, I would just say mow up grass to cover them then, like do a little lasagna layer there.
Another option would be straw, and that's pretty inexpensive. You get a big bale for, I don't even know how much it is, $10. So it's not super expensive. It's a good mulch we've found especially for like overwintering things. We've used it on our foxgloves that are like the biennial type, and they've done really well with that. It's good for potatoes, at least that's what LaRonda says. I've not used it on potatoes, so I don't know. But it holds in moisture well, so straw can be a really good, cheap mulch. The downside to using straw is that it can contain weed seeds that will sprout, and I think LaRonda has some unfortunate experience with that.
I have, yes. It was a bigger problem than it ever fixed.
And straw can also have herbicides in it that can kill your plants as well. So you kind of need to know where the straw comes from, how it was treated.
Next we have wood chips. And this is something you can get for free often or for very little money. We have a local sawmill here that we can go get a giant scoop of wood chips from for about $25. And that'll do quite a bit of my landscaping and garden. It's inexpensive and it's great for around more like perennials, bigger established plants, trees and things. I used some this year on my garden that was really fine and composted. It almost turned back to dirt. So it wasn't that effective at suppressing weeds, but it was still beautiful mulch. The downside to wood chips is that if they're green wood chips, they can actually tie up nitrogen for a year or two and just stunt your garden. Ask us how we know. We one time used some they had been composted for a few months maybe, but some wood shavings, I guess it was, around our dahlia beds, and it was the worst dahlia year we ever had. It tied up the nitrogen. So we've learned some of these lessons the hard way. Don't do that.
Probably my favorite mulch to use is compost. We've tried making our own over the years, and there's a bit of a science there, and if you don't get it hot enough, you'll get weed seeds. So I just buy in compost. But there's a co-op here in Ohio that sells really good compost, and we use it in our old garden. I've been using it here in my new garden as well, and I really like it. Some of the benefits to using compost as a mulch is that it adds nutrients to the soil, doesn't harbor weed seeds typically, and it also won't have like herbicides in it. Some of the downsides to using compost, the fact that compost is usually finer, it doesn't hold moisture as well. It also breaks down quicker and doesn't keep the weeds out quite as well as some of the other mulches that we use.
So there's probably other kinds of mulches to use. These are just some of the common ones. So my preferred mulch is leaf compost, just because it's free and it's readily available. I have used mostly that, and it's really good for building my soil. I have really sandy soil, so it adds a lot of organic matter to it, which probably is good for most soils.
So my favorite mulch is probably, well, a combination. I usually do about 1 inch of compost on my beds, and then I'll put grass clippings on top of that. I would say for most of my bed. I do have a couple of perennial borders that I want to start mulching with wood chips. It just hasn't happened. I get desperate for mulch, so I just mow a little bit more, and put grass on it. But grass has done really well in my beds. I did put some leaf compost in the first year. I think that really helped the soil structure in my garden too. I have a lot of clay. So I think like leaf mulch is like one of the best things to add organic matter to just about any type of soil. And then I do think the compost and the grass clippings are helping as well. So those are my preferred mulches.
So a question we got is, do I have to worry about weed seeds like dandelions and clover or whatever you've got in your grass clippings? And that hasn't been a big issue for us. Obviously in the spring, if the dandelions are in seed, we'll usually just mow that up and toss it. We won't put that on the beds. The theory there is that if you mulch thickly, it actually heats up and kills some of the seeds, but I don't know, it hasn't really been an issue for us.
Another question we got is, do wood chips deplete the soil of nitrogen? I don't really know. I don't have just a ton of experience with that, but I would say probably not, especially if it's bigger established plants. I did a little searching online, and it looks like maybe just the top inch or so of the soil is affected by a lack of nitrogen. But then once the wood chips decompose, they release the nitrogen back into the soil. So I would say probably not a big deal there. I'm not sure that I would till them into the soil if they aren't composted, just because that may tie up more nitrogen in the soil.
So is it necessary to add cardboard or paper underneath your mulch? And no, neither one of us does that, unless we have a perennial weed problem in an established bed. We've done that in our peony beds.
Another question, what type of mulch doesn't provide a hot spot for slugs, earwigs, cutworms, etc.? Good question. I would probably say compost for that one.
We just choose to deal with the slugs, cutworms, earwigs, that kind of thing, because we want the mulch. But then what can you do for that? And we use Sluggo Plus, which is kind of a one-stop shop, kind of gets all of them. I will link it in the description if you're interested. It's available on Amazon.
Another question, do different mulches impact the soil months and years after being applied? And yes, they can affect, I would say mulches affect the soil in the short term. If you notice that wood chips are depleting your soil of nitrogen, like if your plants are yellow, you can always fertilize with, fertilizer that's got nitrogen in it. If you have a bad batch of compost, that can take a while to recover from. If you use straw and it's been sprayed, I'd say the same for that. If you use grass clippings that are full of seeds and don't continue to keep the beds covered, if those seeds don't die before they get to the ground, they could, increase your weeds in that bed. But then the positive side of mulch affecting your soil is all the nutrients and, like we mentioned earlier, the organic matter. All of that helps to build the soil health.
Now, if you've been buying little bags of mulch at the hardware store or Walmart somewhere, you're probably going to get a lot of money into it. So we would encourage you to look around for like big bulk options. If you check with your local sawmill, if you have one, tree trimmers, that kind of thing, just check around. You have to ask and see if you can't find a free or very inexpensive mulch. We mentioned the city leaf dump. I don't know if every city has one. I'm guessing they probably do. Ask around about that. Your local farm store or co-op will have straw, and if they don't have compost, they can probably point you to where you can get it.
And you can check with your neighbors too. You know, if there's someone who farms or has, animals of some sort, you can get some compost and manure sometimes.
Yes, I have a husband that farms, so I check with my husband occasionally.
Another question we have is, I don't have a bag mower, no access to manure, and little money. What do I mulch with? First of all, start with some free leaf mulch if you can find that. And you can actually make your own as well. If you mow over your leaves and pile them up for, well, it takes a little while and it takes a lot.
But they don't have a bag mower.
Oh, that's right.
A bag mower.
Well, you can mow it in strips and then rake it up. Yeah. You could also use straw if you can find a good source for it, because that's not really expensive. I would say just look in the area, see what you've got, ask around for sources, and also just do a Google search. That can sometimes help you find stuff.
So what's the best tool for shoveling mulch? That would be a shovel, if it's something like compost, or you can get a little garden fork. It's just a short-handled, steady little fork that works really good for doing a bunch of mulch.
Another question, can I mulch dahlias before they sprout? And I'm going to say yes. I did that this year with great success. I planted mine and it was supposed to rain for a week, and I thought, oh no. So I went and I very thickly mulched with grass all of those dahlias. It's the first time I've ever done it. I don't even think I told you this, LaRonda.
Really? No, I didn't know this.
And I was a little bit worried about it, but I was like, I know that grass can shed moisture, once it's dry. And sure enough, they started poking up through that thick layer of grass. And so I went around and just sort of, roughed up the grass around the spots and looked for sprouts and stuff, made sure they could get up through pretty easily. And
my theory is if they can poke up through soil, they can poke up through mulch too.
Exactly.
Okay, that pretty much concludes the points that we have here. One more thing I would say is if you are adding mulches, any kind of compost, leaves, grass, it's probably a good idea to get your soil tested. I haven't had issues really, except this year I think maybe I'm low on nitrogen in a couple of my beds. I need to test those to make sure that I'm not messing up the balance of nutrients in the beds. Let us know your favorite mulches in the comments, any stories, tips, pointers you'd have for us, and we hope you all have a good day.